Young children have open minds and vivid imaginations that can easily carry them to distant times in history if their environment is rich in literature, art, and primary sources. Sharyl Green's teaching involves many genres of the arts, including the art of movement. For that component, she teams up with Susan Adams, the physical education teacher. For their Westward Movement unit, her third graders mix movement and poetry about westward migrations to investigate the real emotions of uprooting oneself. Afterwards, they try to persuade their fictional families to move or not move based on their own emotions and interpretations of the situation.
I talk about history beginning with yourself and how important that is. So kids are grounded in their own sense of family history. All through the year they have assignments about collecting more stories. When we do human body studies, they need to interview someone in their family about a broken bone that they had. So that picks up a whole piece of family history. And part of the curriculum launching into westward expansion, I decided to say to the kids, I want you to find out about the move your family made to Jericho. What year did it happen? How old were you when that happened, or did it happen before you were born? How did your family choose the house? And why did they move to Jericho? Something that happened to them, of course, in the course of the move was another part of the family history. And so there's this constant collecting that goes on. Once that's in place, then I feel like I can begin to really move them away from their own family, away from our town, and look at these larger patterns of historic movement. I often talk with the kids too about literature that really moves us, writing among ourselves, examples of writing that really move us because somehow we can make a connection to them. This was a book that came out just a few years ago called Writing Freedom by Pam Minoz-Rhine. It was the first book that she wrote. I did this as a read-aloud with my kids, and we also had discussions about it. And then when it was finished, we recalled all the scenes that we could recall. And then I asked kids to make a choice about which one they would like to do as a watercolor painting. When kids are allowed to express what they know in a variety of ways, they really can show what they know. And I think that that's important for everyone to be able to, find their intelligence in a variety of ways.
Children have so many ways of expressing themselves, and I think that as teachers we just have to give every opportunity that we can find. And we have to find a place for every child. We can never say a child cannot express their thoughts. There has to be a way for every child to find an avenue of expression, and that's how their mind really becomes alive, and that's how they become excited about learning. We study movement every day, and I consider movement the basic thing that I teach. And so whether we're working on basketball or we're working on soccer or working on creative dance, from the very, very beginning, from when I have 5-year-olds in kindergarten, we move every day, and we talk about movement, and we look at people moving, and we talk about how comfortable it is and how beautiful it is and how wonderful it is when everything is working. And so I think that my classes are very movement oriented, and though I'm a physical education teacher, I can connect that to sport or dance or whatever we're doing. And I even think about when I'm driving around town and looking at things. Movement is just a huge part of my life and very, very important for my students.
When I was reading Mississippi Mud, I have a feeling that sometimes these people were bone weary. That means it's as tired as your body can be and you're still alive. Looking for one that really looks great. Freeze! Crawling in the mud till I count to 1, 2, 3. Freeze!
When I first looked at this book of journal writing, the struggle that these people had going across the country, the mother is obviously pregnant when they leave, and she gives birth to a baby along the way. They lose their family pet. They go along the trail with their beautiful possessions on the side of the trail, like a rocking chair or a grandfather clock. I was just crying when I read that part. Just how do you tear that stuff out of your family? And I didn't know if the children would really understand that. I wouldn't in any way force them to do that, but with some of the pieces, some of the passion of slavery, and some of the difficult struggles come out after a while. And I think that it's good for children to feel the passion of a struggle.
When we were happy, I felt like maybe the wagon trains and wagons had just crossed a river and survived. And when we were sad, maybe someone just died.
I think that it really essentially helps us to understand who we are as human beings. I think that's what social studies is about.
In the gym this morning, we were putting together some skits for each other's poems from Mississippi Mud. And we were acting out some of the story with our bodies, and the person who decided to memorize it would basically be saying it.
So this is what's called, at very famous places, this is called a work in progress. Just show us where you're at. Is that okay? That's how great pieces get created. So who is brave enough to go first?
Astride. No one saw me creep out of the cabin. The sky pink as our baby's face. I borrowed Caleb's horse, gentled enough to let me swing up and hold the rope. Off we went across the stumpy fields as my legs gripped the horse tight. I opened my mouth and hollered so loud and long, I woke the geese in the yard and they shouted back.
Assessment is an anchor for us because it helps us know the quality of the work and what people are really doing. And with the children, we do a lot of self-assessment or peer assessment. And I think what happens with that, and we use rubrics, it really helps the children focus on what we're looking for. Did they have a beginning?
Yes.
Did the person who was reciting have a clear, strong voice?
Yes.
Absolutely. Did the movement tell the story?
Yes.
Did they have an ending?
Yes.
The ending was a little fudgy. The ending should be really clear because after they do that hilarious thing, they have to bring it to closure. And that would make it even better. There were some real surprises for me. The geese, the goose that just started to take off. That was probably, a signature performance for that child.
The connection back to the classroom as we talk about a good poem almost always has a cartwheel at the end. It's a twist or a turn, some kind of surprise that the poet leaves us with. And you can see that through many of these poems. And so that was the cartwheel at the end of the poem, was that goose.
Yeah.
And so there was the cartwheel in movement too.
I think that the work that we do with across curriculum, using different avenues of expression, does offer the opportunity to bring out the best in every child.
When you work in this way, what you get is fresh and it's alive, and there is so much mileage that we get out of it. And the sparks that fly among the students and between us and back to the kids, that's what keeps it going. Developmentally, this is the time that understanding another person's point of view really comes into its full body, we could say. One of the ways that I start getting kids to understand that is in writing. So they're making these beginning attempts at getting outside of themselves and then looking at a situation they're familiar with from someone else's point of view. This book is the journal of a young Native American girl and her sense about how scary and vulnerable she felt around white people, and she had just heard about them coming and didn't know what that meant.
When the white men and the families came, it really affected the tribes and stuff of the Native Americans because of taking the land and just pushing them off each other's land.
Again, there's always more than one point of view, and these kids are really able to begin to digest that now. We also talked about people who were slaves who were freed at the end of the Civil War, and there were still some people going west, but some of those people, before they were freed, were forced to go west. I'm very moved about the more that I read, and I see it in my kids trying to make these decisions, is that a huge part of the population that didn't have any choice about going west was the children. So I am sure that there were children of this age who were excited about going. I'm sure there were children who were terrified about going. I'm sure there are children who couldn't stand it to leave behind the people they had to leave behind. That's a tremendously huge forced movement that hundreds of thousands of children went through, and it wasn't their decision.
There's an assessment for going west. The assessment says that each of you needs to write a letter, and you have a very big decision to make. Because what we're going to imagine is that you have the opportunity with your family to go from the east, and imagine it's 150 years ago, and travel out west to Oregon, to California, wherever you're going. And you have the opportunity to do that on a covered wagon or in a covered wagon. But you also have the power today to make the decision about whether or not you think it would be a good idea to go west. And your family is counting on you to decide. This piece of writing is actually called
Persuasion.
It has to do with persuasion. And what's that ending?
Persuasive.
It's a persuasive piece. Remember when we were talking about the poems in Mississippi Mud, and we sort of put them into categories? Some of the poems were really focused on the struggles, and some of the poems were focused on the joys and the celebrations. Okay? So I'm going to start just a brainstorm list here.
Well, I don't know which one, but I think it's a struggle. You might be leaving people that you really, really love.
Thumbs up if you agree. Could that be a struggle?
A solid home at last.
Solid home at last. So lots of these people really met their goals, right?
Yep.
Smallpox and measles we also talked about. If you're a person that decides you are going to convince your family, persuade them that it would be a good idea to go, you need to use at least 2 or 3 details. Maybe you'll even write 5. They could be on this list or they could be in your head, about reasons that you think it would really be worth it to go. You also, in your letter, need to let them know that you understand there will be some struggles and that you've thought about them a little bit, and this is how you're going to overcome them, or this is how you're going to feel okay knowing that there are going to be some struggles.
If you ask the big questions, you need to honor whatever comes back to you. And it may not be what you expect. And it may not always fit the rubric exactly.
Mom, Dad, let's go west. There's great soil and gold.
I may have to alter it because it didn't fit.
And make a bow and arrows.
There are no right answers. This is not about right answers.
But still, there are deadly diseases like cholera and smallpox and measles also. That's why I don't want to go.
They were really clear. I don't like to ride 6 hours to my grandmother's. Why would I want to go 6 months in a covered wagon? You know, again, they could bring it back to themselves and their own lifestyle and put that on paper.
Dear Ma, I've been thinking about going west, and I don't want to. It's so much nicer here in Vermont, and there's so many diseases to catch and die from if we did. We could also die from starvation and dehydration. Sincerely, your son. Dear family, I would really like to go west. We would have to pack food and seeds. We would be going through struggles, like we could get cholera and dehydration. We would be leaving people we love. Dad, you would not have to plow. Mom, there is really good planting soil, but no coffee, sorry. Great peaches. Please, I'm up for it.
I hope that they can touch back into history and understand that there were people that came before them who had some of the same kinds of struggles that they did, and that the struggles that they're going through now are helping to pave the way for their children and grandchildren and the people who come after them. And that it will never be easy, but it will always be worth doing.
Through these activities, Sharyl and Susan help the children build a sense of time and where they come in the grand continuum. Learning about the past and being able to connect on a human level with people from long ago help children understand the human story of which they are a part. This is a crucial element in beginning to build strong identities in our youngest students.